The lesson.
Oh yeah.
Thundamentals.
My man,
What's poppin'?
here we are.
For the fans that don't necessarily know exactly how Thundamentals all came together, do you guys want to share light on how you guys formed the group? Because to my understanding, you're from the Blue Mountain, and you were originally Connect 4.
Yeah.
So
For like
tell
one
us-
gig. When we didn't have a name for the crew, and we were just like, had this opportunity to do, just support, I think it was for Muffin Platonic.
Hunger Pains album launch.
Hunger Pains album launch.
They ring us up, they're like, do you guys want to play? And we're like, yeah. And like, what's your name? And we're like,
Shit, we don't know.
and then they did it again for the Herd. So we got a support for the Herd, and we still didn't know. And so then we called ourselves Thundamentals,
Yeah.
which
And
was
it's just
his bro.
Yeah, it's kind
But you should call it Thundamentals.
of, yeah. It kind of, yeah.
It always rains in Katoomba.
It always rains in Katoomba and
It's
Blue
mental.
Mountains where we're from. So it was just the kind of like, yeah, just the kind of ode to that, I guess. But, you know, it's like, sometimes you choose names for shit, like when you're young. And, you know, you might look back on it and go, that's kind of a bit bug, like it's not the best name or whatever. But a name kind of can become cool if the music or the art associated with it is good. You know what I mean? Like if, I don't know, like if I was to hear the name The Beatles or something, and like I'd probably be like, you know, whatever. But they made legendary music, so the name grows. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. I mean, one of my favourite DJs is DJ Rectangle. And when I
That's
think
it.
about that name, it's like, you know, if
Yeah.
you
I
said
haven't heard
DJ,
that name in so long. Oh my god. He was buff.
Yeah, and he's dope. But if you think about, if you said DJ Circle or
Yeah.
DJ Square,
Yeah.
yeah, how tripped out does that shit
Yeah.
sound? But he made
Unless
the
you're
name.
dope. Unless you're dope.
He made the name dope. When
Yeah.
now it's just like, yeah, Rectangle. So you're like, oh, I haven't heard that name in ages,
Yeah.
Totally.
but you remember it. 'Cause he's
MC
dope.
Squared would have been a good name. Like DJ Squared, MC Squared. You know what I'm saying? Maths,
You know,
science.
our mate has a mad DJ name, like DJ Terrorist.
Oh yeah,
Like Terrorist?
Yeah, that's dope. was it Platypush?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's our homie from
Well, yeah.
the Blue Mountains. So yeah, so to shine a bit of light on, I guess when we were coming up in the Blue Mountains, we're kind of from a small town called Katoomba, which is just, you know, it's not too much popping off other than kind of cafes and real little spot. But when we were coming up, it was like a real musical hub, and especially for hip hop, like Hermitude from our local neighbourhood, good friends of ours, and they'd started doing their thing. Earthboy had started doing his thing, but like our immediate kind of crew were these friends called Down Under Beats crew, and one of the producers, DJs from that crew, is the homie DJ Platypush, who you just mentioned, and his brother Codex, and they were the two producers for this crew, Down Under Beats crew, and they actually won Triple J on Earth, like back in the day, like way back in the day, and they were kind of putting on their own shows, and like in the, because there was one,
And it was slamming, like,
yeah, and it was like,
bigger than Sydney shows.
yeah, it
Like
was
200 people would rock up to a
yeah,
Katoomba gig, and then you'd go down to Sydney for a local hip hop gig, and there'd be like 30 people there. It was weird.
yeah. So it was this cool little
Mad
like
community.
ecosystem that kind of we had going on up there of just like, I wasn't even really, like when we started, that like kind of in tune with the idea of people doing hip hop in other parts of Australia. I mean, I'd heard, you know, Hilltop Hoods, but apart from that, it was just like, yeah, just this insular little thing, you know. It was almost like internet, you know, social media, all that kind of like access to things that you have now wasn't even really popping off like that. So
Like, the only two people that really knew what was going on properly was Down Under Beats, Platypush and Codex. And they knew about Australian hip-hop history. And they would bring up people like Sarek, and we'd get schooled a little bit from them coming up and hanging out with us, like going out of their way. But other than that, it was like really like innocent, especially stylistically. Everyone was just kind of doing, as long as you kind of sounded like yourself, everyone was kind of doing what they wanted, and we had our own kind of sound, I guess.
Yeah, but we were very much kind of like naive to the wider kind of idea of Oz hip hop, and there had obviously been
It was a bubble.
many crews before us and many artists before us, but we just
Didn't know
about it, So it was kind of like this organic thing that just popped up in our like neighbourhood with all our local crews and that, and some of the members of Down Under Beats were as well, like Joan New, and Dielectrics,
and Immune.
And Immune, who was another MC, but I guess Dielectrics went on to kind of do a bunch of solo stuff, and him and Joe New with Pegs formed that Gully Platoon, released that Gully Platoon album all together. So yeah, it's a little
Squad.
Yeah, gang. But yeah, that's kind of a little kind of light on how we started. And I mean, Morg's one of the producers for Thunders, and Tucker were friends from like since pretty young, just kind of like I think met in like
skateboarding and stuff.
Skateboarding and playing video games, and Katoomba used to have this arcade. It was like the one cool thing that the town had popping off until it died. But yeah, I think you guys met there, maybe.
Yeah,
playing Time Crisis or something.
He introduced me. I got my PlayStation stolen, so I had to go to the arcade all the time, and I met Morgan there. And he rode a skateboard and was into hip hop, and I was just this hectic nerd. And so I was just hanging out with him all of a sudden because we did dual Time Crisis. And he introduced me to like cannabis and cannabis.
Both the artist. Plant.
And the plant. And skateboarding, and I never looked back. And DMX. I think that's around when DMX came out. I was just obsessed with DMX.
Shit, DMX was popping in his prime, man.
Oh, man.
At that time, I was like, whoa, it's crazy.
So where does Pancho fit into the mix?
So, as well as the hip-hop kind of element in the community, there was also a huge musical element with heaps of different bands. So there was like a reggae night, there was a jazz night, there was a hip-hop night. And they're all promoted by slightly different people. And then around the same time, like, I guess, kind of like Cat Empire was around. There was heaps of bands with MCs. And so I was in a band called Rum Punch, and where I was like rapping with musicians, and Pancho was like the trumpet player in this huge band, jazz ensemble hip-hop thing called Jumbled At. And he was just like a child prodigy. Like, he was the youngest dude in the band, and he was just insane at trumpet. And I'm pretty sure Morgan might have introduced him to cannabis and cannabis as well.
There's a theme. There's a theme popping up. Morg's corrupting the minds of young people.
And yeah, he's always kind of been around and always been interested. We've always had a relationship. And then around we did a Leica version, or a cover for Matt Corby's brother, and that was when it was properly solidified that we were making music with him, because he kind of came into the studio and helped us perform that. But before that, he was doing like session work with us, playing trumpet on all sorts of beats. Like, I think he was on most of my solo records and Morgan's records, just doing like accompaniment for trumpet. But around that time, like 2012, he started getting into production, and now he's just a monster.
Kev was like the young homie, like younger than us, that we just kind of took under our wing, and he's a crazy talented musician.
He's the
only trained musician
in
in the crew. The rest of us just kind of just picked stuff up and taught ourselves. But he'd always been around just as like a friend who was crazy talented, who would play on tracks. And then I guess the last few years we kind of like made it official, him an official member of the band, and so he's rolling with us full time.
So now Thundamentals is a four-piece band.
It's 4-piece now, yeah. It used to be a 4-piece as well for a while. We had a friend called the Silent Titan. His producer name is. He was in the crew in the early days as well for the first album.
For the EP and the first album.
First EP and the first album.
So
yeah. We've had various members, but it's always like been myself, Tucker, and DJ Morgs as the core kind of members, and now as well with Pancho. So yeah, back to being a 4-piece.
And then, so I guess in terms of, you know, being from Blue Mountains, where you guys are from, and saying you didn't have a lot of access or exposure to Aussie hip hop at that time, were you still bumping all the American shit?
Definitely. It was kind of... Basically, I moved down to Sydney after I left high school and realised there was a huge Sydney scene and there was a huge Melbourne scene and stuff. And Morgs went travelling, and we were still kind of... At that point, we weren't even in a band. We were just still, like, friends making music. But I think, like, our main inspiration has kind of been from, like, things like Tribe Called Quest, Black Star, and Hermitude. Like, Hermitude was directly in front of us, and, like, we could see what they were doing. So from a production level, they've always had a huge hand in, like, influencing us from afar, kind of thing. But yeah, like we said before, we were kind of naive to an Australian scene until, like, yeah, these weird gigs started happening, and you'd meet people like Surrect and that kind of thing.
I kind of, like, got access to hip hop firstly, I guess, through my older brother, who was like 3 years older than me, but he just used to have all these wild tapes and get vinyl and stuff, and Das Effects and KRS-One and, like, Busta Rhymes and a lot of East Coast kind of stuff, but
It's like Rick.
yeah, just stuff of that era, yeah, like Tribe, De La. That was the shit that really spoke to me, because it just felt like...
Easy going.
Yeah, it just felt like there wasn't any pretense to it, you know? It was kind of like, they weren't trying to be hard, they were just like...
Saying
We're just trying to be creative, just be ourselves, just try, you know, make it funky, make people feel good. And I think that's kind of like what we've always tried to do with Thunders as well, is just to, you know, just to make music that hopefully makes people feel good and
be honest.
And yeah, and just be ourselves, and, you know, we're not trying to thug it up, we're not, you know, we're just...
I reckon, like,
chilling.
The first time I heard The Hoods was on my way to high school, and I heard Nosebleed Section, and I was like, this is the first stuff I fuck with. And then we met the rest of Elephant Tracks through Hermitude, so The Herd. We just really, really were on the same, respected their message and what they were saying, and I don't really think a lot of Australian hip-hop was saying what they were saying at that time either. And so we were really Elephant Tracks camp for a long time, in terms of, like, pardon the cliche, but the herd of it, like, clinging onto that kind of element. And that was also Sydney hip-hop as well. So what I've found is, like, what's beautiful about that era for me is, like, I might not have, like, fully fucked with someone's music until I met them, and then you meet them and you're like, okay, I get it now. But Australian hip-hop was, like, has come, like, a long way. And Surrect actually told me once, like, one thing that's happened recently, like, when he started, graph writers were making the beats, you know, and these days it's like full-on musicians are making the beats. And so there's a total different kind of perspective of how to make the music when you're coming from like the different elements like that. And at that time there was still, like, you know, just people like us that have never had any, like, we've never wanted to be trained musicians, but these days you've got any like full-on crazy musicians making it. So it's a total different landscape now. It's like, it's not just 16 bars in a verse these days.
And a scratch hook.
And a scratch hook and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Delta and Peg's second record, Axis, like that was all flames. But truth be told, I think that's when stuff started getting, like, not commercial, but as in there was a small idea you could get a career out of it. So, like, there was more attention going into making better and better product or whatever. But just in those first stages where we started, I guess there was the Calling and the Herd. Just their general, like, going to watch them play live all the time and that kind of thing.
Calling's fucking incredible, hey?
Man. Dude. Also, a crazy slept on record, I reckon, is Exit Strategy, Astronomy Class's first album. That is a dead set
Exit Strategy from
classic.
Brisbane?
No, it's Astronomy Class's album. It's called Exit Strategy.
Debut album, Exit Strategy. Crazy record, man.
Yeah,
It's
right.
really, really good.
And Ozzy
Check
Butler's
that out.
solo, man.
Yeah.
Such a sick record. Wild Colonial. Madism. But yeah, I remember first joint I kind of heard, Aussie joint, where I was like, damn, this is sick. Was and it's even like, it wasn't like way back even, it was just like, I remember I had a job like as a gardener, and I was like trimming this old lady's fucking bush. How funny does that sound? But I was literally like,
trimming an
this
old lady's bush.
And she had the radio going. It was on Triple J for some reason. I was like, damn, what's this old bird listening to Triple J for? But it was it was Muffin Platonic, heaps good. And I was just like, damn, this is such a well put together song, beat, hook, like the accent, like the slang that was getting used, and I was like, damn, like, and this is getting played on national radio. I was like, fuck, like it was a moment for me, you know. And it's kind of one of those moments where I thought, I really want to do this with my friends and make our own music and put out our own kind of message and that kind of vibe. That was the
Shouts to Muff Platonic.
Shouts to Muff and Platonic, man. But shout outs to all those artists. Delta, Australian, crazy record, definitely a big influential record when we were coming up, and Hoods, of course, and Lyrical Commission. Crazy, you know, forefathers of this shit, so.
The lesson. 2-7. Oh, yeah.